The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Let's start with the intro first. Welcome back to the Road to No Way Home series. I am Innocent Villain, a hopefully up-and-coming YouTuber. This is a series that I decided to do since the new Spider-Man No Way Home is coming out. I decided to rewatch and review every single live-action Spider-Man movie leading up to and obviously including Spider-Man No Way Home. The previous 4 episodes are in a playlist on my channel if you want to check them out. And this video pertains to The Amazing Spider-Man 2 by Mark Webb, starring Andrew Garfield, Dane DeHaan, and Emma Stone. And it's not as bad as I remember it, but it's still my least favorite Spider-Man movie. When I first saw this movie, I was in such a bad mood. This is the only Spider-Man movie that I literally walked out the theater upset. I didn't have a good time, and I didn't understand why at the time. Like, I hated the movie, like, a lot, and I just didn't get why I hated it. It just really rubbed me the wrong way. I saw it with a bunch of people. I saw it with my dad, his girlfriend at the time, her kids too. Like, we had a good time. It was basically like a group outing, you know. I was in a really good mood. It was like the 4th of July too. Like, I was in like the best mood I could possibly be. And this movie put me in a bad mood. Like, I walked out and I'm just like, what happened? How we get here? What happened? I remember liking The Amazing Spider-Man at the time. Young me, past me did, but current me, not so much. As you've seen, if you've seen my last video, if not, go watch it, and you'll get my opinion on it. But I was just like, I enjoyed it. Like, teenage me was like, I enjoyed it. Why am I not happy right now? What happened with this movie? Why was it not good? It's a Spider-Man movie. They can't be bad. It's by law. And oh man, it's just so sad, so very sad. So to get into the movie itself, obviously I'm going to get into spoilers, as the rest of my videos in this franchise are, and if that bothers you, well, that's unfortunate. Um, but here I go. So I think the biggest issue with this movie is people always complain that Spider-Man 3 by Sam Raimi had too much going on, and that's why the movie failed. But that movie, although it had a lot going on, it still managed to focus on what mattered and got through the point of the story. This, however, has literally too much going on. Every character has multiple different plot lines that they're focusing on, and the movie tries to give time to every single one of them. There is literally too much happening in this movie for it to have any kind of focus at all. Peter, I'm going to go character by character with this to get across how many different things there are. So, Peter, his focus of the movie, he doesn't have one. He has a bunch of different things that he's trying to do. He wants to be with Gwen, but he's haunted by Captain Stacy, so he's like, all right, I can't be with Gwen. I'm not going to date her anymore. And then you have him trying to rekindle his relationship with Harry, who just appears in the movie, even though he was never mentioned in the first movie, or that him and Peter were friends. He just shows up and he's like, oh my god, Harry, heard your dad's dead, so let's be friends again. And then they lackadaisically are kind of friends the rest of the movie, even though they only share like a few scenes together. And then Peter's struggling with money, but that doesn't really matter all that much because you never really see him need money for anything. And then he's, doing his Spider-Man thing, and then he's dealing with Electro, and there's just so much. Oh, and the worst part, he's also trying to find out what happened to his parents, and it's why? Why is this just one character? Why is there so much? Like, there's like 5 or 6 plot lines right here that could cover an entire movie alone. But then you have all the other characters. Because when we get to Gwen Stacy, her whole plot line in the movie is that, should I be with Peter? Should I not be with Peter? She's like, I want to be with Peter because I love Peter, but then also I'm going to do my own thing and move on with my life and move to England and go to Oxford. And it's like, okay, that's fine. That's it. She has those 2 plot lines throughout the whole movie, and she just keeps jumping back and forth. She has no consistency with it. She's not like, at the beginning of the movie, she's like, Peter, I love you, but I can't do this anymore. I can't deal with your guilt about what my dad told you. You have to either move past it or we're not going to be together. And since you can't move past it, I'm breaking up with you. We're done. And then halfway through the movie, she goes, hey, Peter, can you come meet me? Look at me. I'm so cute. We should just be friends. You know, we're not going to get back together. And it's just like, make up your mind. Which is it? Do you want Peter out of your life because you know you can't be together? Or do you want to be with Peter? You can't have it both ways. It just doesn't work that way. And then we get to one of the first villains in the movie, Max Dillon, aka Electro. Max Dillon's actually a really well written character in this movie up until like towards the end where he becomes Electro because the movie doesn't really focus on him anymore. Like the first hour of the movie is really good for Max Dillon. Like his whole transition from Max Dillon to Electro is fantastic. He's really well written. He's the only character in this movie that has a well written story, which is a hot take because I know everybody hates the way Electro is portrayed in this movie. Most people make fun of it a lot, and I'll get into the funny part with the gap in his teeth at the end of the video so I can end this video off on something happy and light. But yeah, Electro's whole story is that he's an invisible guy. Nobody really sees him. He gets pushed around. He's basically Tobey Maguire from the first Spider-Man movie. Everyone shits on his life. I didn't mean to curse there, but whatever. It's too late. I'm not going to edit it out. Can't edit it out. Anyway, you know, everyone craps on his life. You know, he gets pushed around at work by people in the street. You know, he nearly gets killed by the Rhino at one point. You know, his mind is fractured because after he gets saved by Spider-Man, he thinks the two of them are friends because he has no friends, he has no family, he's just a dumb, nerdy, well, he's not dumb, but he's a nerdy guy who just, everything goes wrong in his life. You know, he made plans that revolutionized power systems in New York, and they stole the ideas from him and didn't give him any credit. Like, everything is like, sucks. And then he ends up turning into Electro because people disrespect him. He gets told on his birthday by his boss, I'll bring up later, that he has to go and fix something that's gone wrong. And when he goes to fix it, he's like, hey guys, it's really dangerous. Can you like do this stuff for me so I can do this? And they're all like, no, I'm going home. Do it yourself. I don't care. So then he has to do this super dangerous thing because everybody else abandoned him. And then he ends up turning into Electro as a result of that, which I thought worked really well. And then when he becomes Electro, the whole point of him becoming Electro, people make fun of it a lot. They say that the reason he became Electro is because Spider-Man forgot his name. But that's not what actually happens in the scene. Yes, Peter does start to forget his name, but then because of Max's fractured mind state, he says his name out loud to Spider-Man, and then Peter's like, yeah, Max, right? And he's like, you do remember me. Like, his mind just doesn't process that he said his own name, and that's why Spider-Man remembered it. The real reason that Max loses it, the reason that Max Dillon becomes Electro, is because of his life, because of the character traits we were shown throughout the rest of the movie. Max, as I mentioned, is someone who's invisible. He always wanted to be seen. He always wanted people to care about him, which is shown in the scene where he meets Gwen Stacy. Gwen runs into him when she's trying to catch an elevator. He holds it open for him. She praises him and is like, oh, you're such a gentleman. I appreciate the fact that you did that for me. And she remembered the fact that he said his name was Max when she got out of the elevator. He's like, oh my God, you remembered my name. Max wants to be seen. He wants people to like him. And that's what happens in the Times Square scene where he becomes Electro, is that he's scared, he's freaking out, he wants somebody to help him. And then Spider-Man, the person he sees as his friend, shows up to help him. He's trying to help him. Spider-Man's telling the cops, he's like, guys, listen, don't shoot Max, don't antagonize him, I'm trying to help him. And all of the newscasters in Times Square have all of the screens in Times Square focused on Max. You know, he's lit up everywhere. He sees himself all around. He's like, you all see me. You all see me. And then what happens is Max steps in some water and, you know, it fries him a little bit because obviously he's made of electricity. And he gets shot and he starts lashing out at everybody, which results in Spider-Man having to save people in Times Square. So then the newscasters focus on Spider-Man. And when that happens, that's when Max's mind snaps. And Max is like, oh, I see. You're just like everybody else. You're selfish. you can't let the spotlight go when it goes to somebody who's never seen it. And Peter's like, no, 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 Max, I'm trying to help you. I'm not trying to. He's like, no, 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 I get it now. You're just like everybody else. You're selfish. You're evil. You don't want to help me. You just want to harm me. And that's when he becomes Electro. It's not because Spider-Man forgot his name. It's because he felt that Spider-Man was like everybody else who treated him wrong in his whole life. So then he's like, all right, screw it. Since the last person I thought I could trust, the last person I believed in has failed me, then why should I care about anybody? And then he becomes Electro and he starts destroying everything. And honestly, I think it's really well done. At the time when I first saw it in theaters, I thought it was terrible because I misunderstood, the character development and everything of Max Dillon. But yeah, that's the last scene where, well, actually, that's not true. There's one more scene where Max is really good, and that's the scene where he gets the name Electro, where he's locked up in Ravencroft and they're running experiments on him, and he's just like, when I get out of here, I'm gonna shut the lights out in the city, then everybody will see me, Spider-Man will see me, I'll kill him, and they're like, well, who are you? And he's like, don't you know? I'm Electro, which granted that line delivery was a little bit cheesy on Jamie Foxx's part, but it's fine. One cheesy moment and the rest of his character being, well written and great. Is really good. So I did enjoy that. And then next, Harry Osborn. This character just, I like him less now. I didn't have much of a problem with him when I first saw him. Like, I didn't like him then, but I have more of a problem with him now, and that's a result of the Spider-Man 2018 video game. Because those two, this series and that game, have the same plot line for Harry. That, excuse me, Peter and Harry have been friends since they were kids. However, something happened that resulted in Peter and Harry being separated for years. In the 2018 Spider-Man game, it's that Harry is sick and that he goes away, and Peter hasn't been able to contact him for years, which they explain why that is later on in the game, which is in a post-credit scene and everything like that. I don't want to say it because it's a setup for Spider-Man 2, if you haven't played the game. And they do it a lot better in that game because throughout the course of Spider-Man PS4, you have the time to do side quests that let you learn about Peter and Harry's relationship. You get to hear, Harry speak, and you get to hear Peter's monologues about him and Harry were so close and things they went through. So you get the connection of them as friends, so that inevitably, when you meet Harry in Spider-Man 2, you have that emotional connection. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 doesn't have any of that. Harry just shows up, and Peter's like, oh yeah, Harry, my best friend, I heard your dad died, so I came to check on you. And it's just like, wait, hold on, let me, I'm looking for where you mentioned that, like, in this entire franchise before this one scene. Oh, you didn't. Got it. Because the whole first movie of The Amazing Spider-Man was on the crux that Peter needed to get into Oscorp. So Peter goes to Oscorp to meet Kurt Connors, and he sneaks in there. He uses Gwen to get to Kurt and everything like that. But if Peter and Harry were best friends, why didn't he just, I don't know, call Harry and get like an appointment with Kurt Connors? Like, if they're that close, why didn't he do that? They try and write it out of the movie by saying like, oh yeah, when Harry has a passing line where he's like, yeah, when my dad sent me to boarding school and I left New York, I tried to forget everything about New York, and that's why I kind of forgot about you too. And it's just like, that's not enough. That's not enough. What realistically probably happened is that they wrote The Amazing Spider-Man 1 without Harry in mind at all. And then when they got to the second one, somebody told them to put it into the movie, or they decided they wanted to use Harry, and they were like, okay, but you didn't explain their relationship. Like, you never brought up Harry in the first movie at all. Peter never talks about him. They don't meet. So what are we gonna do to explain it? So they wrote that passing line in there that Harry just kind of distanced himself from Peter, which doesn't work because, no offense, if your best friend just doesn't talk to you for years, you're not friends anymore. That's just how it is. Like, I've had friends when I was kids. I don't talk to them anymore. We're not friends anymore. But then my friends who are closest to me, they contact me frequently to make sure that I'm okay, or I contact them to see if they're okay because we are friends. It doesn't work the way that it's like, oh, hey, you know what? I don't know you for years, and all of a sudden it's just like, ah ha ha, yo, what's cracking, bro? You know, no, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Harry and Peter are basically not friends anymore, and that's why I give credit to Spider-Man PS4 because it alleviates that. This is the reason why Harry can't contact people is because he is sick. He doesn't have the capacity to speak to people. You know, it goes through reasons as why Harry and Peter aren't in contact with each other. It makes sense. But in this, Harry and Peter are both fine. They both have the ability to contact each other. They just don't until this one moment. And Peter mentions it's been 8 years since they've seen each other. You two are strangers at this point. You're not friends anymore. Enough about that. The next thing that bothered me about Harry is that another one of his plot lines is he's dying, is that his family has what I read is called Goblin disease, at least in this movie. I forgot what the technical term of it was called in the movie. And Harry is now dying of it. And he doesn't want to die of it, obviously. But the problem is that it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's one of these things that try to have you go suspension of disbelief, but the rest of the movie isn't written well enough for me to just buy that and let it go. Is that Harry's dad tells him that at Harry's age, which Harry's like 19 or 20 in the movie, that when he was Harry's age, that's when the disease started developing in him. Harry's dad is middle-aged at worst. At best, my bad. He's middle-aged at best. At worst, he's like 70 or higher. Like, Harry has years, decades even, before this disease should kill him. But for whatever reason that's completely unexplained, Harry's goblin disease is operating at an accelerated rate. He's dying the way his father was in the capacity of days or maybe a couple weeks. So, what's different between Harry and his dad? Why is Harry dying decades faster than his father? They never explain that. And it bothered me the whole movie because it's like the crux of his character. He's like, I'm dying. My company's being stolen from me, and I need my company to find out how I can survive. And I need Spider-Man's blood so I can find out how I can survive. And he's like, I'm losing all these things, and like I can't trust anybody, and everybody's crapping on me, and I just don't want to die, and yada yada. And it's just like, why are you dying so quick? This is the main point of the movie. This is the part that needs to be written well. But no, that doesn't happen. Harry's just dying really fast, and nobody cares to explain why it's happening, except I just have to accept it. And it's just so bad. But I hope that through this entire tirade about each character's plot points and what happens in the movie, you get why this movie is so cluttered. This movie's like 2 hours and change, and all of those points get their own scenes. They're fleshed out. And then that's not including all of the scenes that are set up for future movies. Like how there's a secret lab that has all of the technology to build the Sinister Six. Like Doc Ock's arms are in there, the Rhino suit's in there, the Goblin armor's in there. It's like, oh, okay, so there goes set up for the Sinister Six. You see that a couple times. Felicia Hardy is Harry's assistant, who, if you don't know, Felicia Hardy is the supervillain Black Cat in Marvel Comics. Like Alexei, aka the Rhino, is the first villain you see in the movie, and he shows up again at the end of the movie in the Rhino armor. It's just like they throw in all these references. Oh, and as I mentioned earlier, I would bring back up Electro's boss from when he still worked at Oscorp. His boss is Alistair Smythe, who, if you don't know, in Spider-Man comics is the Spider Slayer supervillain. So they have all these references to characters that exist in the future because they were trying to set up future movies. I remember leaving the theater for Spider-Man, and like as soon as the movie ended, I opened up my phone and it was like, hey, Sony plans to make a Sinister Six movie after The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then they're going to make The Amazing Spider-Man 3, and I'm just like, this movie didn't even do well, and you guys are planning 2 more movies. focus, guys, focus. All right, you have one mid movie and one bad movie, and you were planning to make two more movies. No, your track record's not good enough to do that. Just no, just wasn't. Oh man, they just did it really bad, and I just don't know what else. Like it's just this movie's just so cluttered. Now, to break up my negative ranting, I will say some positive things about it. The Amazing Spider-Man franchise did have the potential to be the best Spider-Man franchise because all the actors in the movie act well. Dane DeHaan, Emma Stone, Andrew Garfield, etc. They're all great. They all do a great job acting. Uh, this has the best effects to this day of any Spider-Man movie. I don't know what happened, like why the effects seem to have gotten worse. Like, don't get me wrong, the Spider-Man Home franchise has really great effects, especially the scene with you know, Spider-Man fighting Mysterio. That's great. That I'll get to in Far From Home 2 weeks from now. But just it looks very CG, which is a problem that a lot of people have with it, is that the Home franchise looks very CG, and then the Sam Raimi franchise took place in the early 2000s when we didn't truly have a grasp on effects yet, so things still look a little computer generated. They're not the best, which is fine. I get that. I accept that. But the Amazing Spider-Man franchise nailed it. Things look real enough when they're fully computer generated. I don't have anything jarring. It's like, oh man, that looks like it came out of a computer. No, I don't have that feeling. It all looks great. Costume designs are great. It's just beautiful, with the exception of Electro. I don't like the way Electro looks in this, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the effects are great. The directing is great. The casting, again, I still have a problem with Andrew Garfield looking too cool to be Peter Parker, but outside of that, the casting, great. Just acting, great. Everything was great for this franchise, except the writing, which is the most important part, which is sad, because it literally had everything going for it, except that one thing, which unfortunately was the most important thing that they needed to get right, and then, poof, it failed, which is very unfortunate. Better. As I just mentioned, I don't like the way Electro looks in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. He just doesn't look very good to me. I understand what they were going for. They were going for the full electricity thing, that he's living electricity, which has worked, and I've seen it look really well in, if you haven't seen it, the MTV Spider-Man franchise that aired in the early 2000s, starring Neil Patrick Harris as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. That was a really good series. I really liked it. Granted, the animation is outdated, but it has its own unique style, and I enjoyed it. In that series, Electro, Max Dillon, is in it, and he has a similar thing to this Max Dillon. He's made of completely living electricity. He's blue and everything. However, his design is based off of what happened to him moments before he died. In that show, Max Dillon is a bullied college student. He gets hit with a brutal prank where people throw a bunch of paintballs at him. They're throwing balloons filled with paint at him, shooting him with paintball guns, and then he runs away and he gets struck by a bolt of lightning while he's in front of a neon sign. So the neon mixed with the paint and the lightning, and it turned him into Electro. However, the paint that was on him burned onto his body. So now his body is covered with these weird electric paint scars that made his character look really cool. And I was like, all right, that's great. I like that. It looks great. In this movie, though, Electro just looks weird and blue. He just doesn't look intimidating. Like, he looked really intimidating in that first scene where he's like freaking out and like all the stuff's crumbling off him when he puts on the hoodie. He looks really intimidating in those first few scenes. But like when he gets the suit and he's got the weird battery like counter on the side of his head, and he's wearing like the black skin tight suit, he just loses that menace that he had. I don't know what it is about that costume design. It just doesn't look good. But if you've seen the new Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, I think Electro looks really great in that. I think Jamie Foxx looks really great as Electro in No Way Home, especially since, he's got the criminal energy going, wearing Tim's, like, bro's really ready to stomp on you, like, looks cool. But anyway, didn't like that design. It just wasn't very good. And I've been neglecting to talk about the Green Goblin because he just shows up and it sucks. He's really bad. Harry Osborn in this franchise as the Green Goblin is god awful. It's so bad. He literally just shows up. So a big part of the movie, as I mentioned, is that Harry is dying, and he does research and he comes to the conclusion that he needs Spider-Man's blood to heal himself because they got rid of all of the cross-species genetics projects they were working on, so he can't do any of that. And he's like, I need Spider-Man's blood. So he asks Peter to get him in contact with Spider-Man so he can get Spider-Man's blood. And Peter doesn't want to give him his blood because he's afraid it'll turn him into a monster or kill him. But he doesn't do anything else to help him. There's no reason for Peter not to give Harry his blood. He should be like, all right, Harry, guess what? Hey, I'm Spider-Man. I'm going to give you my blood. The two of us can work together to figure out how to make it. But also, this is something that I'm personally theorizing. I think that Peter was supposed to give Harry his blood in this movie, but something happened along the way that forced them to change the writing. Because, as I mentioned earlier, one of Peter's plot lines of this movie is that he's still hung up on his parents and he's investigating them. So that goes nowhere because all it tells us is that Peter's dad created the spiders, and unfortunately, it does a thing that some Spider-Man comics have done, which is really stupid, is they make it fate that Peter became Spider-Man. Is that Peter is literally the only person who could have survived the genetic experiment and become a hybrid animal person. So he was the only person to become Spider-Man because his dad mentions in a video once he finds it in the secret underground train tunnel that he opens up with a token. Oh boy, that was stupid. I'm sorry. I just need to take a moment because that was just dumb. Anyway, the underground train station that he finds his dad's hidden secret lab in, and he watches the video that his dad uploaded, which, quick tangent. At the beginning of the movie, his dad uploads that paperwork and his research and that video to that underground lab, but no one knows it exists. So what was that for? Like, originally I thought they were trying to upload that information because I thought it was going to get out to the public somehow. But no one is able to find it. The only reason Peter is able to find it is because he has his dad's stuff that has the tokens in it. But in the video, it's not like he addresses it to Peter like he expected Peter to find it. So, but why didn't you just, like, I don't know, destroy your laptop instead of sending the data to this train station that could be found by the bad guys at some point, even though it's highly unlikely? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it was something that was superfluous that was done to have Peter find it later, which is just stupid. Anyway, back to the whole thing about how I believe that Peter was originally supposed to give his blood to Harry. Back on topic. So when Peter finds this video from his dad, he watches it and his dad says, yes, the only people who could survive getting bitten by the spiders and so forth are Parker's because he put his own DNA into the spiders so that no one else would be capable of, reverse engineering it and using it on other people because he was afraid of what would be done with it, which is fine. But that information goes absolutely nowhere. It has no bearing on the rest of the plot. Peter just, like, is emotional when he reads it, and then they just move on. And then he, like, shows up, he talks to Gwen, and then he finds out she's going to Oxford, and then he says, I love you, Gwen. And then it's like Harry frees Electro, and they go on their whole thing, and Harry turns into the Green Goblin. Electro steals the power from New York, and then Gwen and Peter go to fight Electro and the Green Goblin, and it's just like, what did him finding out about his parents have anything to do with the rest of the movie? It didn't change anything. Peter even says that the reason why he's looking for his parents' research to learn what happened to them isn't because he's hung up on his parents. So, if you're not hung up on your parents, what are you finding it for? Like, he has a conversation with Aunt May where he's like, listen to me, Aunt May. You're everything I need. You're the only mom that I care about, but I need to find the research for something completely different. But they never say what that other thing is. I believe that he was originally supposed to give the blood to Harry, which is why he was investigating his father. Because if he gave his blood to Harry, and then Harry used it on himself, and it turned him into the Green Goblin, before Peter found this information about it, that he learned that, only Parkers could survive it without being turned into a monster or dying, then it would be Peter's fault that Harry became the Green Goblin. Instead of it just being like, Harry's the Green Goblin now. Like, That would have been more emotionally impactful. If Peter's like, yeah, Harry, I trust you. You know, I believe you. You know, you're my best friend. I trust you with my identity. I trust you with my blood. Use it. Please save yourself. And then Harry turned it into a serum. You know, you could say that creating the serum took like a day or something like that or whatever. You know, so Peter would have time to learn about what happened to his parents, and then Harry would inject himself with it, and then he become the Green Goblin. And then before Peter is able to get to Harry, you know, obviously before he becomes the Green Goblin, what can happen is he has to fight Electro. And then once he fights Electro, that after that he beats Electro and he has to fight Harry, who is now the Green Goblin. Or maybe, better yet, why don't you have Harry become the Green Goblin like, I don't know, like 60 to 70% into the movie, then that way Peter feels guilty about it. You know, we have time to explore that, and then Harry could free Electro from Ravencroft, and they could team up to kill Spider-Man, and we could have a final battle where Peter has to fight Electro and the Green Goblin and protect Gwen Stacy, which would result in her death at the end. I feel like that would have been better instead of it literally being Peter fights Electro and then the Green Goblin shows up immediately after, which this is something really stupid. Harry immediately turns into the Green Goblin. I know it sounds weird, but I'll explain. Like, his mannerisms change. Like, he gets the Green Goblin laugh and he starts acting crazy and manic, and it's just like, he has pumpkin bombs too, which is just like, like it just doesn't make any sense, because like it made sense in the Sam Raimi trilogy why Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin had the pumpkin bombs. He made them himself. However, this version of Harry literally just turned into the Green Goblin. He hopped into the Green Goblin suit because it would help heal his body and stop it from shifting and changing as a result of taking the spider venom. So why was it equipped with pumpkin bombs? Like, who at Oscorp was designing this suit of armor and this glider and then the bombs, and they were just sitting down and was like, bruh, I really like Halloween, so I'm gonna make these bombs look like pumpkins. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why were they designed to look like pumpkins? If they were regular grenades, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but they're specifically designed like the Green Goblin's pumpkin bombs. Why are they pumpkin bombs? It doesn't make any sense. But it is that way. So, just whatever. Just it's just too much going on here. Just too much going on in the movie. It doesn't help. But anyway, as I was saying, if Peter knew what happened with his parents, you know, if he was able to not save Harry because he didn't find out too late that Harry becomes the Green Goblin, it adds emotional impact. It focuses up the movie a little bit, because Peter failed to save Max when he turned into Electro, because he wasn't able to stop people from seeing him as a villain. He wasn't able to stop Max's mental state from deteriorating and seeing Peter as selfish and not helpful. And then Harry, he would have failed in the opposite regard. He would have tried to help him, but his own hubris by not knowing about his parents' background and their research resulted in Harry turning into the Green Goblin. So this movie being disjointed and like villains just appearing and Harry and Peter dealing with them and dealing with all this other random stuff, it could have been the point of the movie is that Peter can't save everyone. No matter what he does, no matter what he tries, sometimes he screws up, and that can create worse horrors than what he originally tried to stop. And that would be the point of the movie, is that because of everything Peter's done, he failed to save Electro, and he failed to save Harry, and they failed to save Max, and he failed to save Harry, and they ended up becoming Electro and the Green Goblin. And then, as a result of that, it brought about Gwen Stacy's death. Peter not doing the right thing, Peter trying to have everything he wanted, resulted in all of these bad things happening. And I feel like that would have been really cool. And that's why I think Kevin Feige and John Watts and everybody working on Spider-Man No Way Home had the right idea, because it's literally what they're doing with Spider-Man No Way Home. The point of that movie is that Peter tries to have everything, and because he tries to have everything, everything goes wrong. I feel like that should have been the point of this movie. Peter wants to know what's going on with his parents. Peter wants to be with Gwen Stacy. Peter wants to save Harry. Peter wants to stop Max from turning into Electro. He wants to have all of these things, but then none of it works and everything falls apart. So I feel like that would have been a better point to the movie than just having all these random things just happen with no cohesion to them. It's just, yeah, it's just annoying to me. This movie just doesn't work to me. However, I will say that it does have a few good scenes because, like I said, this movie had a lot going for it before all the writing in the rest of it was bad. There are montage sequences where Peter's going around as Spider-Man saving people. The opening scene where Peter is swinging through the city, fantastic. I have gripes with him stopping the Rhino in the opening scene of the movie because he literally stopped saving people and stopping the Rhino to tell jokes, which I thought was really stupid because people end up dying. Like, if you watch the scene, you can see civilians getting crushed by the 18-wheeler that Alexi is driving. And when he fights Electro, he leaves the fight for like 2 minutes to grab a hose to fire at Electro. But in those 2 minutes, Electro was frying people on the streets. And you could say, well, you just left to grab the hose, so it's not like he really left the fight. It's like, yeah, technically, but no one knew where he was because a cop comes over the radio. He's like, does anyone have visuals on Spider-Man? We need Spider-Man. Does anybody see Spider-Man? So he was gone. Nobody knew what happened to him, and all these people were just dying. And it's like, oh, all right then. Well, I see. This is unfortunate. That's a problem that Spider-Man has in this movie, is that he vacates the fights or just doesn't do the hero thing so he can tell quips, which Peter tells quips during his fights to alleviate his nervousness. But he doesn't stop the fight. It's not like he's mid-fight and he's like, hold on a second, I gotta tell this joke real quick. No, he doesn't do that, which is something he does in this movie, which I thought was really stupid. It is what it is. It can't be changed now. But, yeah. I guess to end off on a good note, as I mentioned, I would talk about some positive things before I ended the review. So, like I mentioned, the montage of Peter saving people and parts of the opening sequence looked really great. I love that. It was fantastic. And then the thing about Electro. So when Max Dillon falls into the vat of toxic eels being electrocuted, something superfluous that happens is that the gap between his teeth gets fixed, which is just, there's no reason to it. It just happens. It's not like it changed anything about his character. It's just a weird shot. You just see it like go like, and it closes shut, and it's like, did it do anything? It's not like Max was crippled and like it fixed his, body. It's just a gap in his teeth. Whether he had a gap in his teeth wouldn't stop him from being this electric man that can shoot lightning and everything. Like, this doesn't change anything. It's completely unnecessary. If anything, you should have talked about the fact that it made him go bald. Like, I don't understand what fixing the gap in his teeth did for the story. It's just a weird shot. Like, it didn't look cool. It's just like, what? Why did you do that? What was the point? It just doesn't make any sense. But to end this on a very high note, I believe the last scene of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is one of the coolest Spider-Man moments, in my opinion. The scene where Peter returns as Spider-Man after that little kid stands up to the Rhino, and he's just like, hey, Spider-Man, I'll take care of this. You go take care of your mom. He's like, I knew you'd come back. And he's like, yeah, and he fist bumps the kid, and he, like, grabs the microphone, and he's just like, all right, Rhino, as an offense to the people of New York and all rhinos everywhere, I'm going to need you to put your mechanized paws in the air. Yes, he does say paws instead of hooves. That is not me making a mistake. That is in the script of the movie. And then Rhino's like, no. And he charges and he's like, man, I love New York. It's great to be home. And then he runs up and he grabs like a sewer grate and he like swings it around to like hit the Rhino in the head and it cuts to black. And I was like, oh, just peak Spider-Man right there. So cool. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie isn't like that, but that scene, really cool. One of my favorite Spider-Man moments, at least like movie-wise. Anyway, yeah. So I think that about wraps it up. Yeah. So that's the end of the Amazing Spider-Man franchise in this series. Next week we start the home trilogy, in the home stretch, if you will. Got Homecoming, Far From Home, and then finally I get to sit in theaters and see Spider-Man No Way Home, which I cannot wait to see. It's going to be so much fun. Very much looking forward to it. Hope you enjoyed this review if you happen to see it. If not, well, can't do much about that. But yeah, at the end of the day, I am the innocent villain. I hope you stick around for the next review that's coming out. Thumbnail is by my good friend CuriTuber. You should check out his streams. The link is in the description. And remember, folks, hit that like button, comment, and lastly but not least, You are innocent until proven villainous.